Hello, I'm Llewellyn King, the host of White House Chronicle. It is part of the American dream. Indeed, maybe it is the American dream to own your own business, small business, the backbone of the country, loved by politicians, but seldom helped by them. That's a strange dynamic where politicians know that small business accounts for a large part of our employment, is the most versatile, nimble part of the economy. But of course, the lobbies speak for big business. But small business remains something that is always available to an entrepreneur in the US. It is one of the great and fabulous aspects of this country. My guest today is Bryan Mason of the Apollo Consulting Group, headquartered in Newport, Rhode Island, who is an economic consultant who helps small businesses, and I'm going to ask him to define what he means by small business, but up to 12 to 50 employees, perhaps smaller. Bryan, welcome to the broadcast. And what is a small business?
Well, the official definition is 500 people or less, but there's a lot more companies in the 5 to 50 employee space than anything else. It really tapers down really fast. I think of small businesses up to like 300 people. Most of the clients that I deal with are 100 or less employees.
Now, your strength is you go in and you tell people who have little businesses how to make them more profitable and how to keep them in business. What are the common mistakes you encounter?
Well, I think the first thing is that small business owners, they don't think about what the business strategy should be, which really is like, what are you doing that's different? What is your secret sauce going to be? What niche are you filling? What need are you answering? They don't think about that. So if you think about some niche, then you can wrap everything around delivering that niche. The second thing is they don't think about marketing and identifying who their target customer is and what are their characteristics and how to reach them and so forth and so on. So the lack of a really defined and focused business strategy and marketing strategy can be really detrimental.
But I see small businesses everywhere, and the common factor tends to be that somebody had a trade or a profession, more commonly a trade, saw how they could turn that into self-employment, the first step in small business, and then prospered and had the 5 to 12 employees, or all the way up to 100, but never really knew how to run a business, had no training in the business side of what they were doing, didn't understand about taxes and corporation, profitability, long-term goals, salability, getting the company ready to sell it at the end of the period when you're tired of running it or when you just grow too old for it. All of those things they don't know about. If, for example, you're an automobile mechanic and you start a garage, you aren't thinking about those things. You're thinking about getting a premises, enough tools, and enough customers, and maybe some credit at the bank. And in that score, good luck.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the good side and the bad side altogether, because usually an entrepreneur is good at something. They're good at making something or delivering a service, but they don't think about these other things, and it's really important to think about it, especially going back to the strategy for 1 second. You can't be all things to all people, right? You really have to pick out a little sub-market that you're going to try to address, because the big broad markets are being addressed by big companies. So you have to differentiate yourself. It's absolutely critical for small business.
So there are not many small businesses that just people sit down and say what is needed out of the air. They sit down and say, I'm a hairdresser, I can start a salon. I'm a well driller, I can start a drilling business. That's the common way.
Yep.
It also means that a majority of small entrepreneurs don't usually have a lot of formal education. They tend to be people who work with their hands and then go into business and have to work with their hands and their minds. do you see a lot of deficiency there?
Well, it's kind of some of each. Some people are well educated, but they still don't have all the skills to run a business. And a lot of people, as you say, work with their hands, and they need a little bit of help on some of these other aspects of a business. And unfortunately, a lot of business can fail over some of those other details. And so it's a really big problem.
What are the things you have to overcome when you're hired? How do you overcome because most entrepreneurs, being self-made, don't want any advice.
Absolutely.
Let alone they think some person with a timesheet is going to come in there and do a lot of calculations, embarrass them, humiliate them, and at the end of the day, still not understand what their business is.
So I think one of the things is that I get clients because they have certain problems that they're not able to solve, and they fundamentally they want to make more money, and they look at the different problems and the different things they might do, but sometimes one problem, a solution to one problem aggravates a different problem that they have, and so they can't sort it out. So one of the things that I've done is to create this process called the Apollo Profit Acceleration Technique, and it's really the fastest way to figure out what are the right moves to make to drive up profitability. It's a three-step process. I model the business, I do scenario analysis, and identify the key drivers of success. What are the things that are going to change profitability by 20%, 50%, 80%, not 3%, 4%. In the second step, I look at all those things and see which ones can we affect, which ones we can control, and which ones are beyond our control, and I craft strategies to move the dials on that thing.
Let's go to a case study. Pick one from your experience and where you've been able to come in and perform everything you've just said to good success.
A good example, working with a doggy daycare with 3 locations, and they weren't making very much money, and they had a very high-end
One doesn't
service.
think of as doggy daycare as being a big money business.
Exactly.
But it can still be profitable.
Absolutely. And so their problem after analysis was they had a lot of fixed cost, and they had low utilization of their facility on most days. So one of the things that we figured out was we needed people to buy more from us. So we devised a pricing strategy, which is also something small businesses don't know that much about. And basically, you could come in and just use it for a day. You could buy a 10-visit punch card. And what we decided is we wanted people to come in that were going to use it a lot. So we raised the price of the single visit, we raised the price of the 10 punch card, and we came up with an all-you-can-use in a month for a very kind of exciting and compelling price. And that way you could, if you were shopping on the weekend and you were out, 5 days a week, you could just drop your dog off anytime.
Did you do some serious analysis of what the dogs thought about this? Did they want to be away from home more?
Well, this particular place had the dogs not in kind of cages or cooped up, but playing with other dogs. So I would say a lot of the dogs would have liked that.
Give me another example.
Another business was a bowling alley, and they needed to transition to be a multi-entertainment center. But in the short run, they didn't have the funds to do that. So they were selling bowling by time. You can play as many games in 30 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever you buy. So what we figured out was we needed to sell more food and beverage and drinks, right? So we needed to drive up the spend per visit. And the way to do that was to charge by game instead of by time. So there wasn't a penalty for hanging out, getting food, eating food, using up your time. So that's another kind of situation that dramatically improved the profitability of the company by something that you wouldn't even think about.
Is the solution to a business problem often right in front of the proprietor's nose?
I'll tell you that I've done a lot of this modeling and sorting this out for clients, and sometimes some of the biggest factors are not even on our radar scope. And it's partly because we're all too close to it. But even when I come in and I look at it, you think about it, well, that might work a little bit, but is it going to really move the dial? It doesn't seem like it would really move the dial. But when you look at an average spend of 78 cents on food per visit, and you can drive it to, you know, $2.25 on average, that's a lot of money with a good margin on that. Translates to a lot of profitability. So I would say that, you know, we're always trying to find the kind of secret sauce that fits each business, that is the thing that really drives the profitability, and often that is not that visible.
And you can go into any business. You don't feel intimidated by, I don't know anything about trucking, or I don't know anything about pizza, or I don't know anything about computer repair.
Well, I've certainly worked in a huge range of businesses, and I'm very adept at learning that business. But I think that the process of finding out what the data tells you about what are the key drivers doesn't require as much expertise in a particular industry. In fact, many people have commented that they had consultants before that were experts in their industry, and they really couldn't help them because they're too much in a groove. And I'm really looking objectively and thinking of strategies that have worked in a different industry and applying it to them, for example, that nobody would think about.
Now, most people don't think you're taking in a consultant.
Well, especially with small companies, there's no money for consultants, and there's no money to bring somebody in and do something that doesn't work, right? But usually they have a problem that they're trying to solve, and it gets to the point where they really want to solve that problem. And so being able to talk about how I've solved that problem for 5 other companies becomes convincing for them. And along the way, sometimes I find other things that need to be done that are even more important to them, but they were so fixated on this first problem, you need to solve that first.
And are people embarrassed?
I think that by the time they get talking to me, they're really ready for some help. And I take them along a journey. We do it together. So they see, as I uncover these things, you know, step by step by step. I have never gotten to the end and made a recommendation that they didn't want to do, because they've partnered with me throughout the whole journey, and it becomes really obvious what they need to do by the end.
Bryan Mason, we're going to take a second for station identification. This is White House Chronicle, and we identify primarily for the benefit of our listeners on Sirius XM Radio, channel 124, the POTUS channel, where the audio from this channel can be heard 4 times every weekend. This program is seen on 200 American television stations and around the world on the English language broadcasts of Voice of America. It is also translated into Chinese by Voice of America. We are White House Chronicle. We come to you usually from Washington, D.C., sometimes from around the country, and we've been dotting around the country recently. And today, the broadcast is from my home in West Warwick, Rhode Island. My guest is Bryan Mason of Apollo Consulting, and I, of course, am your host, Llewellyn King. Back to Bryan Mason. Bryan, I have a little company. I had a company. This is true. It was a publishing company. Why was I in publishing? Because I was a journalist, something I knew. So I went into it. But I didn't know a lot. I didn't know, for example, about incorporation. This was a subscription business. I didn't incorporate, and I had a 35-year problem of unincorporated business because I hadn't incorporated in time, and had I incorporated later, I would have triggered an enormous tax burden immediately. Do you look for that kind of problem?
Well, it's rare that I get somebody that is not already an established, you know, at least an LLC. I do run across
limited liability company.
Yes, and so the first thing I say is, you know, it's a really simple process. In the states that I've worked in, you can do it in 10 minutes online, and I offer to sit there and do it with them.
All right.
It's very important.
Let us take, for example, an imaginary person. Her name is Susan. she runs a dry cleaner. She wants to start a dry cleaner, or rather she works at a dry cleaner. She knows the business. She has a little bit of capital to buy equipment, which is necessary in that business, rent a space, etc. What is the first thing besides hanging out the shingle, all those early expenses? Obviously a sign, maybe a little local publicity, some flyers or something to get people to bring their business to you. What is likely to be the first problem that Susan is going to run into?
Well, the first question that I would ask her is, how is she going to be different than the 4 other dry cleaners within an 8-block radius?
And supposing she says, well, they're all busy, why not one more?
Then you're going to be slicing up the same amount of business, and everybody's going to have less.
So would you be able to define a way for her to be different?
Yeah. I mean, that would be the first thing. Whether you want to be, you specialize in something, specialize in
suede or
exactly. Have some element of your business, or differentiate yourself by 12-hour service or open 7 days, or it's got to be around the quality or the service level or the thing that you're specializing in. You've got to have something, and it has to be backed up by reality. So if you're going to give better service, it really has to be better service. If you're going to go pick up from people's houses, for example, you got to do it, and it has to be done efficiently.
Or you've got to be in a critical location.
Critical location. If you're in a better location, you'll definitely get some business than people that are not in as good a location.
One of the bugaboos of all business, and small business in particular, is pricing. Pricing is a whole art form. How much money you need as opposed to how much money you can get, whether you overbid or price yourself out of your market, or you underprice and go bankrupt, which is going to happen after time if your price is not good enough. What is your advice on pricing?
So the first thing is, typical small business, they price like about the same as the guy down the street, but maybe a little cheaper. And the first thing that I would say is that you are not going to be the low-cost producer. No small company is going to be the low-cost producer. It's extremely unlikely. So you need to create some value and charge for it. And so that's the first step, is again staking out the ground that you're going to do battle over. Create something that's worth a premium, because you can't compete on price. If you want to...
So the premium is better service, better quality, something special.
Something different, special, that's backed up by reality. And you have to engineer your whole company around being sure that that special quality actually gets delivered and people can see it and will have a higher perceived value.
How much of a problem are partners? People starting a business, it's lonely out there. There's no paycheck coming at the end of the first month. Nothing is guaranteed. They tend to get partners, often in family, who bring very little, a bit of money, but not enough. And this becomes a drag, a problem. Do you discuss with your clients how these partners can sometimes be or need to be retired?
Well, that definitely is an issue, and it's been an issue with a number of my clients. If it's in an early stage business and somebody needs partners to raise capital, for example, the first thing that I tell them is you have to establish a way to buy them out from the beginning based on some, appraisal, some fraction of sales, whatever it is. You need to have a way to get rid of them. And you also need to separate out the raising capital for your business with the people that are working there carrying it out. And just because you're a part owner doesn't guarantee you a job, and maybe doesn't even fit. You don't even want, them to work there. And so at the very beginning, you have to think out whether that person really fits into your business, if that's the only way you can get the capital, and then consider maybe alternatives, because it gets very sticky very fast.
I've seen it get sticky very fast in all sorts of businesses. What are we going to do in this country as a general proposition to get more of the people who go through universities to think of starting businesses, when it's very hard to say, I'm going to start a history shop or a sociology mart or or repair literature offers, it doesn't work. So that we have a lot of graduates coming out who would like to have their own businesses, but really don't know how to begin. What would your advice be?
Well, there's certainly a lot of organizations in each state that have different programs to make people aware of the processes, and even in Rhode Island there's some jumpstart programs where people can learn about it. But I think that, you know, if universities offered a course in entrepreneurship, it would be a really good start, and it should be in the core curriculum, because a lot of people have the capability, the ideas, the drive to start a business, but they don't know how to go about it. I get the phone rings, you know, quite often with, I'm thinking about this business idea, and I'll go meet with them and talk to them and see whether the idea holds any water, or point out the 9 reasons why that's a bad idea and I just saved you a lot of money, you know, kind of strategy. You know, one of the things about the pricings, people want to be you know, they want to charge less. That's their way of doing it. And I tell them, you know, think about your business idea and how much you want to invest. And let's save a lot of time. You just write me a check for that amount, because that's not going to succeed by itself as a small business.
Bryan, would you forgive me if I tell a little story? I started what I like to believe was the first women's liberation magazine in New York about 1965. I had a partner who was a printer. We got along very well, good deal. And it was a small world publishing. And very soon people heard that I was going to start this magazine. Well, of course, I fairly new in the country. I didn't know very many people. But I started it, and a very famous publisher, rather notorious is probably a better word, Bob Harrison, who had started Confidential magazine and become a multimillionaire by selling sleaze, if I might say that. He grabbed me, took me into Reuben's restaurant on 58th Street in New York City, and he said, "You're starting a new book?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "What are you charging?" And I said, 35 cents. And he said, "You're dead. You have to charge 50. Well, basic economics of street publishing were known. And I said, with all the feeling I had, the market won't stand it. It's too expensive. And he said, "Oh, General Motors asks you how much you can afford to pay for a car. 50 cents, you'll win. 35 cents, you're dead, King." I was dead at 50 cents. If the audience had bought it, we would have succeeded before Ms. Magazine. And that is the sort of challenge that I think small business faces, and where they need help.
So did you sell at 50 cents or 35?
35 had failed. Very close to succeeding, but it wasn't enough.
Well, pricing is a very tricky thing, and small businesses need to learn how to use pricing to drive customers into behaviors that make sense. So in the doggy daycare example, we wanted customers that were going to use a lot of stuff. That was the behavior that we wanted. And so we priced it so that we would get that behavior. We would attract those kind of customers. The people that wanted a one-off could go down the street and save money, and we didn't care.
And when you see a company that you think can't be saved, that they're doing so many things that are going to destine them to fail, what do you say? I mean, these are your clients. These are people who are paying you. Do you tell them that they're in terrible trouble? Do you try to introduce a strategy which will ameliorate the problem? What happens?
Well, I absolutely tell them, and sometimes they haven't given me the complete picture, especially early on. And so that's very unfortunate, because then as I dig down, it gets, you know, really bad. So if I can come up with a strategy to do something about it, which is, you know, a fair number of the cases, you know, we can talk about it. But they have to be able to have the resources to do it. One of the things about small businesses, they have the same kind of challenges of big business. They need to, you know, deliver product or service efficiently, make money on it, identify customers, sell to them, do all these things. And except they don't have any money to carry it all off. And big companies, you know, have the cash flow when they get into problems to solve the problems.
And to paper over mistakes.
And paper over mistakes. And with small companies, you don't have the money. So you have to be able to, especially in a turnaround, it has to be something feasible for them. They have to be you have to come up with really creative solutions to the same problem that a big company would just spend money on, of how they're going to do it. And if you can chain them along, so the improved cash flow from the first thing they do helps support the next three things, and then those in turn, you know, create more money, then you can start to chain up a turnaround. And that's really the only thing that's going to work, because usually if it's so bad off, they've exhausted most of their resources.
Hiring and firing.
So this is a common problem, and one of the things that I would do, and I do a lot, is I write well, it's a job description, but it's not a job description that, you know, you would advertise in the paper with. It's a job description of, you know, what is the purpose of this job? Oh, it's to, you know, service customers. What are the primary responsibilities, the secondary responsibilities? What do you have to do? And it's a very practical way of informing people what they need to do and what are the more important things, because if you get to the end of the day and you haven't gotten everything on your list, what should you have been focusing on the whole day? And so if you take that and compare it to someone's ability to do it, you expose somebody that maybe doesn't fit in.
In our last few minutes together, Bryan, when should you prepare a strategy of selling the business? Should you have that in mind from day one, or does that begin after 5 years or 10 years, or when you're an old person and need to retire?
Well, assuming that you haven't done everything perfectly all along the way, you know, having a year or two before you want to sell it is a good strategy. People wake up and, you know, they might get a business valuation and it's a tenth of what they really want to sell the business for. And they haven't thought out the fact that A, the business needs to be very profitable if you want to get a lot of money. B, it needs to be able to run without the business owner in place. So, you know, somebody else has to have all the skills that are needed across the labor force that you have. C, you need to be able to have financials that are accurate and reflect your success story. And then a bunch of other things like delegation of authority, like, you know, processes written down and so forth. That's what makes, you know, a highly valuable company to sell. So a couple of years out is plenty of time to fix a business so they can sell it for a lot.
Finally, Bryan, your company, Apollo Consulting, what would a consultant tell you about Apollo?
I don't charge enough.
Bryan, it's a great pleasure to have you on the broadcast. And good luck. What you're doing is very important. Small business needs help, and all small business people need help, particularly those who don't think they do. That is our show for today. We'll be back next week, and if you're in business, especially small business, good luck and listen to Bryan Mason. Cheers.